Boldwood presents The Hollywood Governess, written by Alexandra Weston, and read by Victoria Brazier and Regina Regan. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Prologue. Dinah Doyle dies. The terrible news from Hollywood this week is the death of Dinah Doyle on the 13th of May. The 30-year-old star of Charisma and the Paradise Club was married to her co-star Aidan Neil. They have one daughter, Erin, who is 6. Crown Pictures announced her death by draping the crown above the studio entrance in black crepe. A statement from the studio said, "We are deeply saddened by Dinah Doyle's untimely death. She was one of the brightest jewels in our crown of stars. Everyone who worked with her will miss her enormously. As a mark of respect, we have delayed the release of Dinah and Aidan's latest movie, Harlequin Nights, which will now open on the 1st of July. Aidan Neil was not available for comment, but released a statement via the studio. I have lost my wife, and my daughter has lost her mother in the most tragic and unexpected circumstances. I ask that you respect our need to grieve in private. The cause of death has not been confirmed, but a source at the studio told our reporter that Dinah drowned in a pool at a villa she was staying at near Newport, California. There have been rumors in recent weeks that the marriage of the perfect Hollywood couple was on the rocks, with Dinah's name linked to 2 of the most eligible men in the movie business. Film Weekly, 20th of May, 1936.
Chapter 1. Wensleydale, Yorkshire, March 1937.
As Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers danced, as Cary Grant wisecracked in screwball comedies, and as Aidan Neil sang, the movie-going public saw what the studios wanted them to see: glamour, sophistication, and elegance. But behind that glittering facade, there were some dark secrets. One of those included me. Hollywood Secrets by M.E. Calvez.
Smoke billowing, the engine huffs into Hawes Station. As it eases to a halt, there's a sharp hissing as steam swirls around the wheels. Doors bang open. I stand looking for my youngest sister, Rose, among the few passengers. I wave my umbrella when I spot her, but then see the look on her face. I turn to my other sister, Meg, who's remained sitting on the bench. She doesn't look thrilled to see us, I say. At 23, Meg is 5 years younger than me. I told you she wouldn't be. Meg gathers her brown paper parcels before she stands. She likes to walk part of the way with Beryl. Well, I don't know how much longer I'm home for, and I want to spend time with both my sisters. I adjust my scarf against the chill breeze blowing down the dale. She can tolerate us this once. I've been home for 6 weeks, returning to damp grey Yorkshire in mid-January, after 5 months in Belfast schooling the daughter of a brewing magnate as she recuperated from scarlet fever. Rose parts with her school friend and waves as she comes towards us. Her felt hat is askew and her gym slip rumpled. She's 16, which makes our relationship complicated. Ever since our mother died when she was 2, I've been more of a parent than a sister to her. "What's this?" she grins as she does up the buttons on her navy coat. "An escort to make sure I get home safely?" "Certainly." I take her arm as I join her. There are rumours of highwaymen on Bellow Hill. "Hester!" She gives me a look of barely suppressed irritation. "I'm not 8. I squeeze her arm with a glove-clad hand. I know. I'm good with 8-year-olds. As a governess, I've had plenty of practice. My pupils are rarely younger than 7 or older than 14. I've got much less idea of how to converse with a 16-year-old. "What brought you into town?" Rosie asks, as we pass through the picket gate into the station yard. A dray is being unloaded. The horse stamps a hoof as it waits. As we pass, the man breaks off from hefting barrels to tip his cap at Meg. Then his gaze switches to me, and he stares. Meg is pretty, the kind of pretty which makes men look twice as she walks down the street. In a couple of years, I expect Rosie will turn as many heads as Meg. I am not similarly blessed. Even before the accident, I had the kind of face the polite would call strong-featured. Now that it is marred by a 3-inch scar across my cheek, I am generally looked at with either pity or disdain. "I had an order to deliver," Meg says as she takes Rosie's other arm. "Hester came to keep me company." Meg's a talented dressmaker. As well as caring for father, she makes clothes for the women of Wensleydale, creating dresses which look a lot like the fashion plates in Weldon's Ladies' Journal, but at a fraction of the price. This afternoon, we delivered a light tweed suit to the doctor's wife, who was delighted with the fit and the exquisite embroidery on the collar. Then we went to Meg's favourite shop, I add, but I dragged her into the bookshop afterwards, so we're even. Rosie laughs. We both know how long Meg can spend in the haberdashers. She adores them as much as I do bookshops, and Rosie loves the brightly packaged arrays of face powder and lipstick in a chemist. Not that she's old enough to use them, to my mind. But that's an argument we fortunately haven't had over the past few weeks. I wasn't that long, Meg protests, and I found the perfect buttons for the dress I'm going to wear to the dance on Saturday evening. I don't think Dan's going to notice your buttons, I say with a smile. Meg's stepping out with Dan Berryman, the youngest vet in the practice in nearby Reeth. It's only been 4 months, but he's obviously smitten and clearly makes her happy. We turn onto the road home. Otterdene, our much-loved house, sits a mile above the town, amongst the dry stone walls and barns that Wensleydale is famous for. It's a 20-minute walk, partly across fields, with a steep climb at the end of it. "Can I go to the pictures with Beryl on Saturday afternoon?" Rosie says. "Head over heels, the new Jessie Matthews film is on at the Elite. Will he be back by 6? Someone needs to take father his tea," I say. I thought I could do it, but I've been roped into making refreshments for the spring dance. "Heavens!" Rosie says. "Who on earth asked you to do that?" "The vicar's wife." I force a smile, which I hope hides the sour taste that's been trapped in my throat since the request was made. "It's only a couple of hours." "Oh, it seems a bit much to land you in the kitchen with the old dears," Rosie says, her voice rising with irritation on my behalf. "You're only 28. "I think so too," Meg adds. "Hester's being far too nice about it." "It doesn't matter," I say, hoping the words will convince me as well as my sisters. "It's one evening." "You should go to the dance with Meg," Rosie interrupts. "I know you haven't been since you got back from America, but isn't it time you stopped hiding away? I've read about this new face powder which would cover your scar, and if you wore your navy dress, no one would see the one on your—" As always happens when someone talks about my scars, my hand goes to where the other one lurks, where my glove is tucked tightly into my sleeve. Beneath the layers of wool and cotton, there's a vicious red gash that runs from elbow to wrist. I'm not going. My stomach curdles at the thought, and it's with some effort that I keep my voice steady. No man is going to want to dance with me, and I'd rather not be a wallflower, thank you very much. Dan would dance with you, Meg says. Because he likes you. I know Meg means it kindly, but this is a kindness I don't want. If I'm going to dance with a man again, I want it to be with someone who wants me in his arms, not doing his duty by his possible future sister-in-law. We reach the stile built into the dry stone wall. I take Meg's parcels and then pass them to her after she's climbed over. Honestly, it's fine, I say, as my feet find the stone treads built into the wall. I'll do my stint at the village hall and be home for cocoa by 9. I offer Rosie a hand as she descends the stile, and then we set off across the field. Sheep munch contently around us as we follow the path. I don't want to argue with my sisters all the way home. I turn to Rose and say brightly, "How was school today?" I'm putting a brave face on it. The vicar's wife's request hurt very much. It's one thing telling oneself you've accepted your future as a blue-stocking spinster, quite another finding that others see you that way too. My disfigurement has catapulted me into the ranks of unmarried women twice my age. I'm sure she didn't mean to upset me, but she's inadvertently made it clear that I would be foolish to harbour any romantic hopes. I thought I'd cast all of those thoughts aside after Julian, but one or two must have lingered in a quiet corner of my heart, or I wouldn't feel so cast down now. In truth, life is easier when I'm working. No one asks the governess to dance. 2 letters have arrived by the afternoon post. One has a familiar London postmark and is in a thick cream envelope which screams quality. The other is a slightly scruffy manila posted in Skipton. It looks like a bill. We do not need any more of those. My Belfast earnings have only just paid off the ones which built up while father was in hospital. Rosie heads to the kitchen to put the kettle on. Jaffa, our chocolate retriever, disturbed from his warm spot by the stove, wanders into the hall. He rubs his head against my leg, and I absently put my hand down to stroke him. "Is that the call, Hester?" Meg says, managing to give the words capital letters. "Yes. With Meg, I don't have to hide the confusion of emotions which come with the arrival of one of the agency's letters. It's always painful to leave my family, and there's trepidation at starting a new position. But there's also a thrill at the prospect of travelling and seeing new places. I asked for something closer to home this time. Father was ill all winter. He caught flu in November, which became pneumonia by December, leading to a prolonged stay in hospital. He came home at the beginning of January, and with the emergence of the first daffodils, he's finally lost the hospital pallor and regained a little of his appetite. I tear open the cream envelope and extract the neatly typed letter. It's headed, Constant Paget Agency, with the words, Providing elite governesses since 1895, in smaller font underneath. Mrs. Paget was a formidable lady, a suffragist and leading proponent of women's education, who, having struggled to find an appropriately qualified governess to teach her daughter, decided to do something about it. 40 years later, and now run by Mrs. Paget's niece, the equally redoubtable Miss Wall, the agency has a reputation for providing reliable blue stockings to home-educate girls from the best families and those who aspire to that exclusive club. They recruited me 7 years ago, fresh from Oxford. The letter is short and to the point, as their correspondence always is. I assured the family in question that we had equally competent ladies available who were more willing to travel, but the family have requested you by name and wished me to assure you that they will offer more than generous terms. The offer is, however, conditional upon you being able to swim. Swim? How curious. But easily dealt with, as I no longer swim. The rest of the details are scant. A girl of 7, recently removed from school, a family in California. A heavy weight settles in my stomach. I think of the promise I made to myself as I stood by the ship's railings and watched the Statue of Liberty grow smaller and smaller. It's America, I say without glancing at Meg. I'll tell Miss Wall I can't do it. Oh, Hester. Meg looks at me with concern. I glance away, biting my lip. Pity, even from Meg, always hurts. Are you sure? I mean, I know you said you'd never go back, but Miss Wall... Meg trails off. There is a frown line between her pretty blue eyes. Will think I've blotted my copybook again, but don't worry. There's a get-out clause. The position requires me to be able to swim. I'll tell her I can't, but that would be an enormous fib, which Miss Wall will never know. My school swimming medals aren't on my CV, and anyway, I don't swim anymore. Without conscious thought, I cradle my left arm against my body and shield it with my hand. I've not been in a swimming pool since the accident. I've tried once or twice. But the thought of unfriendly eyes seeing my scars is more than I can bear. It's another thing I've lost because of what happened to me. I open the second envelope and pull out a thin sheet of paper. Oh, it's the quote for the roof. I've been... Great Scott! Bad? I read out the figure and her eyes widen. Oh, my word, we can't possibly afford that. It says there's dry rot in the trusses and water is already getting in. Did the builder mention that when he came? Oh, I don't think so. Meg frowns. He was up on the ladder for a long time and then he went in the attic. Oh, we'd better go and have a look, I say. I'll get some light. There's no electricity in the attic, so I take the hurricane lantern from the hook by the door, check it's got enough oil, and light the wick. I carry it carefully up the back stairs to the second floor. There are only staff bedrooms and the nursery up here, all unoccupied. We're too old to need a nursery, and we've not had any servants since the Wall Street crash brought our family's finances tumbling down, along with most of the rest of the world's. Meg's waiting for me by the small door built into the end wall. Ready? She says. As I nod, she opens the door. A strong smell of damp wafts out to us. By unspoken agreement, I go first, feeling my way up the stairs with one hand on the wall. The lantern illuminates narrow wooden steps thickly coated in dust. One set of footprints have been here before me, creating distinctive shapes on each step. I make a mental note to clean them before the dust congeals to produce a new kind of life form. I straighten at the top of the stairs and hold the lantern up. It illuminates a ragbag assortment of items. There's a battered steamer trunk, which was Mummy's, Father's army kit, and some very shabby Victorian furniture. I hold the lantern as high as I can. The roof timbers look ghostly, as if they're draped in thick cobwebs. I follow the line of the timber, and at the point where it joins the horizontal, there's a cluster of asymmetrical red mushrooms. Oh gosh, look at these. Is that it? Asks Meg. They look like evil toadstools from a fairy story. Evil, yes. Fairy story, no. More investigation reveals the other timbers have the same wraith-like quality, and there are fungal outbreaks in 2 other spots. A trail of damp is starting to seep through to the rooms below. How on earth did this happen without any of us noticing? Is it my fault for being away so much? If I had been here, would I have thought to check? Probably not. An Oxford education is useful for many things, but the syllabus most definitely does not cover detecting dry rot. By the light of the lantern, I look again at the builder's letter. There's a paragraph I haven't shared with Meg. The next bad storm will likely result in water ingress which will damage the fabric of the building. I therefore strongly recommend that the repairs are started immediately. Cold settles in my stomach. I have to find out what the family in California are offering and make a decision. It doesn't matter how it makes me feel. The important thing is that we have a roof over our heads. We're never going to be able to find that kind of money, Meg says, as she descends behind me. I square my shoulders as I wait for Meg at the bottom of the stairs. I meet her gaze as she steps onto the uncarpeted floor. Can you hold the fort here? If I go, I need to know you'll be all right even if I can't get home if there's an emergency. Oh, but Hester, are you sure? You know what you said about America, and then there's the swimming. Her words bring back shards of painful memories. I blink to try to shift them. It's not New York? My voice comes out unusually quiet, and I swallow hard before I speak again. The job's in California. Won't you have to go through New York to get to California? Meg asks. I'm really not sure this is a good idea, Hester. Remember how you were when you came home. I shake my head to chase the past away. I remember exactly. Damaged in body and soul, shaken to the core by the man I'd thought loved me. It took 4 months of Meg's careful nursing and many hours of reflection before I was ready to face the world again. Let's not worry about that until I've spoken to Miss Wall. I cross the landing and start to descend the main staircase, the heels of my shoes rattling against the stair rods. As I tell my pupils, it's best to confront one problem at a time. We'll be all right. Meg follows me down. Even if Father gets ill again, we'll manage. The reassurance does little to help. I wrap my arms across my chest, hugging warmth into my suddenly chilled body. Can I do this? When I came home from New York in 33, I promised myself I'd never step foot in America again. I never imagined I'd find myself forced to choose between keeping that promise and keeping the roof over our heads. I'll telephone Miss Wall and find out how generous these terms are. Then I'm going to ask her to negotiate. If this family want me to go to California, they're going to have to pay top dollar. I dust cobwebs from my sleeves, hoping my briskness hides my trepidation. After all, I'm a Paget governess. We're supposed to be expensive. But new roof expensive. Who'd pay that? We are about to find out. Chapter 2.
Aidan Neil was hot property in Hollywood by the late 30s. There were more accomplished actors and far better dancers, but he was a truly outstanding singer and commanded the screen like a true star. Hollywood's Secrets by Amy Calvez.
As I wait for the exchange to connect us, I lean against the wall of the wood-lined cubbyhole on the landing which houses the telephone. There is a door, but I rarely close it, because it feels like being shut in a vertical coffin. After inquiring about Father's health, Miss Wall gets down to business. Mr. Neil is a film actor, she says, in the same tone as she might have said lumberjack or chimney sweep. I understand he's quite well known. Do you go to the pictures? Not often. I don't see the point of sitting in the dark, watching images conjured up by someone else's imagination. I'd much rather be at home reading a book. Mr. Neil lives in Hollywood. He's a widower, Miss Wall continues. His wife, Dinah Doyle, died last year. They've only the one daughter, Erin. Erin? I query. The Gaelic word for Ireland. Is that what it means? How curious. Then Miss Wall's voice turns brisk again. The girl has had health problems since her mother's death, and Mr. Neil has decided to remove her from school. The poor child. How awful to lose her mother at such a young age. I know exactly how hard it was for myself, Meg and Rosie when Mummy died. If I accept the position, I'll have to expect that Erin's bereavement may affect her behaviour, and there may be more difficulties to deal with than I've encountered before. And the swimming. Yes, Mr. Neil was quite insistent, but in the circumstances it is understandable. His wife drowned, you see. Miss Wall's stark words do nothing to remove the horror of such a death. I shudder. How frightful. But I don't quite see. You would be required to supervise when the little girl is in the pool. The house has one. There's a crackle on the line, and then Miss Wall asks, You do swim? I close my eyes as I try to imagine myself beside a Californian swimming pool. Sunshine glinting off the turquoise water, beautiful tanned Americans, and Hester Carlyle with her ugly red scars. I force myself to remove the tanned Americans and replace them with an overexcited 7-year-old. I give her a pink swimsuit and plaits. She grins and reveals a gap-toothed smile. Perhaps I can do this, if no one sees me but my pupil. I take a long breath and say, "Quite well, actually. I was Yorkshire Schools champion for 2 years in a row. Excellent. I'm sure Mr. Neil will find that reassuring. And the terms Mr. Neil is offering, most generous, especially considering your past history. Miss Wall never misses an opportunity to remind me that I once let the side down by quitting a job early. In her mind, a Paget governess never leaves her post. She names a figure, and I quickly do the maths. Even if I wire home every penny, it'll take 6 months to pay for the new roof. The weather in Wensleydale means we don't have that long. That is generous. I've learnt it doesn't hurt to be magnanimous in negotiations, especially when you intend to drive a hard bargain. But, Miss Wall, I don't want to go to California. And if Mr. Neil's going to convince me, he's going to have to be more than generous. How much more? Another £2 and 10 shillings a month. There's a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. That would be extremely high, even for one of our best ladies. My spine stiffens. I've spent 3 years with a black mark against my name, only offered the positions everyone else has turned down. If I do this, then perhaps it'll have the added bonus of rehabilitating my career. But first I have to persuade Miss Wall to go into bat for me. You did say Mr. Neil asked for me by name. I pause and see if Miss Wall will get the hint. She doesn't, so I plough on, which clearly means he believes I am one of your best ladies. Miss Wall sighs rather pointedly. Very well, Miss Carlyle. I'll see what I can do. Plus the usual terms, of course. The usual terms cover days off, 1 day a week plus additional evenings by arrangement, notice, 2 weeks on each side, and travel arrangements, 2nd class. Leave it with me, Miss Carlyle, Miss Wall says. I'll get back to you tomorrow. I replace the handset and take a deep breath. Can I really go through with this? As Meg has already pointed out, there's no sensible route to California which doesn't involve docking in New York. My heart is thumping just thinking about it. And what if Father gets ill again? Hester? Father's voice cuts through my thoughts. The door to his room is slightly ajar. Come and have a seat, he says, as I push it fully open. His voice is still wheezy. His lungs were damaged in the war, and the pneumonia has compounded the problems. He sits in a brown leather armchair with a rug on his knee. There's a silver frame with a photograph of Mummy in the centre of the mantelpiece. Next to it, a vase of crocuses is bright against the faded William Morris wallpaper. The bed, a mahogany half-tester with a pale green quilt, takes up most of the room. What are you reading? I switch on the electric light before scooping coal from the scuttle and adding it to the fire. It smokes sullenly for a few seconds before crimson flames lick the coal's black edges. A fascinating article on the excavations at Jervo Abbey in '05. He gestures at the chair opposite him as he speaks. I move 3 issues of Archaeologia, and this morning's The Times from the seat to the nearest table before I sit down. Since he came home from hospital, Father can barely manage the stairs. He uses his daughters as library monitors, frequently dispatched to fetch half-remembered books from downstairs. Sounds interesting, I say. I really worry about Father when he stops reading. He didn't pick up a book for 3 weeks when he was in hospital. That's when I knew he was very ill indeed. But not as interesting as your plans. Where is it to be this time? California, but I haven't accepted yet. He frowns. I thought you weren't going back to America. I swallow hard as I stand and cross to the window to draw the curtains. Should I tell him? The doctor's instructions were to ensure a calm environment. He'd recommended a few weeks in a sanatorium, but even with the Belfast Brewers' money, we couldn't stretch to that. Come on, Hester. My lungs may be decrepit, but my brain is fully functioning. It's the roof, I say, as I sit down again. There's a relief in telling him, even though I know there's very little he can do to help. It's leaking. Oh, that is bad luck. How much? As I name the figure, Father's eyebrows rise. He sits still for a long moment and then meets my gaze. Are you sure about this, Hester? There must be another option. There is another option. It's selling up, or, if no one wants to buy a ramshackle Yorkshire manor house, seeing it demolished while we move into the gardener's cottage. Meg, Rosie and I would survive, but I cannot do that to Father. He loves this house. It's part of who he is. If there's another way, I'll take it. California might be interesting, I say brightly. Mr. Neil's a film star. I imagine that's a very different life to anything I've encountered before. Oh, you'll have to ask Rosie about that. It'll be in those film magazines she's always leaving about the place. He hesitates for a moment before adding, Don't write off an entire country because one bad thing happened. You're braver than that. Am I? I'm not certain right now. Weariness washes through me. Being brave is such a burden. Then I force myself to shrug, because I don't want Father to worry about me as well as the roof. Let's see what Mr. Neil says. My fate is in his hands, or, more accurately, his wallet. I did ask for an awful lot. The book slips from his grasp and lands with a thud on the carpet. The tremor in his hands wasn't there when I went to Belfast. If I go to America, what additional frailty will have befallen him by the time I get back? Tears prickle behind my eyes. As I pick up his book, I blink hard to chase them away. It's jam roly-poly for pudding. He meets my gaze, and there's a subdued twinkle in his faded blue eyes. Don't stint on the custard. Mr. Neil? Rosie leans across the table, her eyes wide. Do you mean Aidan Neil? I'm not sure. I'm chopping onions for dinner, my hand still as I meet her gaze. All I know is that his wife was called Dinah and she died last year. They've one daughter, Erin, that's who— It is Aidan Neil! Rosie breaks into a delighted smile. This is beyond anything. My sister in Hollywood. I'll be the envy of all the girls at school. You'll have to tell me everything. The clothes, the hair, the hats. They have incredible hats. I will if I go. I haven't accepted yet. I slide the onions into the pan and start peeling carrots. You have to! Rosie's hands come together and she's almost pleading with me. It'll be the best thing ever. I smile, because my sisters have such a talent for capitalising their words when they want to make a point. What do you know about Mr. Neil? Miss Wall only said he's a film actor. Oh, he's dreamy. Rose gazes into a corner of the kitchen, as if there's an image of the man projected there. He's tall and dark, and his face looks a bit stern until he smiles, but then he's handsome as anything. It's a good job you're so sensible, Hester. I wouldn't be able to concentrate at all if I was living in the same house as Aidan Neil. Sensible. The word stabs between my ribs. Rosie doesn't remember when I was young and carefree. Sensible is what the world has made me. There's little room for dreaming as a governess. We were all heartbroken when Dinah Doyle died last year, Rosie continues. It was tragic. Miss Wall said she drowned. Yes, that's right, in a swimming pool at a villa she was staying at down the coast from Hollywood. I frown. Could she not swim? It's hard to imagine someone living in a house with a pool and not being able to enjoy it. Well, that's the odd thing. She could. There were all sorts of rumours straight after it happened, but then the studio said she slipped and banged her head and that's why she drowned. What did the rumours say? It's probably none of my business, but if I'm going to have sole charge of a grieving 7-year-old, I'd like to know what topics I should steer clear of. Well, that she was having an affair, which was poppycock. Everyone knew she wouldn't cheat on Aidan. That she drank too much. Good Lord. My eyes widen. Where do you get all of this from? Film magazines. I swapped them with my school friends. They hardly sound like suitable reading material, and I bite my lip to stop myself saying so. Rosie's not a little girl anymore. Very soon she'll be out in the real world where all of these things, and worse, happen. Perhaps these magazines are a better preparation than the Victorian novels I read at her age. Miss Wall said Miss Doyle was famous too. Of course, Rosie says, as if it's the most obvious statement in the world. She was in a bunch of films, some with Aidan, those were the best, but she did some good ones on her own. What kind of films? I add the carrots to the pan, then lift the lid on the stove to put it on the hot plate. Musicals, a bit like Follow the Fleet. We'd taken Rosie to see the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers film for her birthday last year. She'd loved every minute of it. I enjoyed the dancing. Oh, except Aidan doesn't dance. I laugh. How can you be in a musical without dancing? Rosie shrugs. He plays the piano. Dinah did the dancing, but he's having dancing lessons for his new film. You really are a mine of information, I say, as I stir the vegetables. She shoves her chair back, its legs scraping against the slate floor. Hang on a mo. It's several minutes before she returns. I'm adding bacon to the pan when she thrusts a magazine in front of me. This is Aidan. There's a whole article about his new film and Dinah's death. I take it from her with my free hand. There's a full-page portrait shot of Mr. Neil. Rosie's right about how handsome he is. His hair is dark, brushed back from a high forehead. His nose is larger than average above a wide mouth. It is his eyes which draw the gaze, brown or perhaps hazel. They look mournful, as if he has known tragedy and is haunted by it. My heart seems to be beating louder than usual. Careful not to get damp finger marks on the paper, I turn the page and start reading. The article is written in breathy prose, but hidden in the adoration are several salient facts. Mr. Neil is making a film for Crown Pictures called Piano Parade, the first since his wife's death. He's heartbroken, but his daughter Erin gives him a reason to keep going. There's a second, smaller photograph of Mr. Neil and Miss Doyle together. They're sat on a garden bench surrounded by a riot of flowers. He's wearing an open-necked shirt with white trousers. Miss Doyle's dress is a bold, geometric print. Her bobbed hair is blonde. She's got a pretty, heart-shaped face and a cupid's bow of a mouth. The photographer caught them laughing together, heads tilted back as they share a joke. Beside me, Rosie sighs. Look at them. They really were the perfect Hollywood couple. Anxiety robs me of a decent night's sleep. I'm up at 5:30, turning the pros and cons over in my mind. As soon as it is light, I put on my walking shoes and head up the fell with Jaffa. It's a blustery morning, with cumulus clouds scudding across the sky. When I'm far above the house, I look back. Wensleydale is beautiful this morning. A patchwork of green fields stitched together with the grey of stone walls. I spend the day cleaning. It's after 4 when the telephone rings. I sprint up the stairs to answer it, snatch up the receiver, and listen impatiently as the exchange connects us. I'll get straight to the point, Miss Wall says. Mr. Neil is willing to accept your terms, but there's one caveat. Which is? He wants you to start straight away, as soon as we can get you there. There's a berth on the Britannic leaving Tilbury on the 12th. That will get you into New York. My heart shrivels as she says the name. I can't stop myself from protesting, but that'd mean leaving here on Monday. Those are his terms, Miss Carlyle. Mr. Neil was very clear. It was take it or leave it. Do you want to think about it overnight? I slump against the panelled wall. There's a tingling sensation in my chest. I breathe deeply to try to dispel it, but it doesn't help. More thinking time isn't going to help. The leaking roof has left me with no choice. Whatever memories New York brings, I will have to face them. I push myself back to vertical as I say, There's no need. Tell Mr. Neil I accept. Very well, says Miss Wall. There's a pause before she adds, Good to see you getting back on the horse, Miss Carlyle. You could become one of our best ladies, if you stay the course this time. But what if I don't? What happens if I fail as I did before? In Miss Wall's eyes, I showed insufficient backbone by coming home from New York. My injuries were not life-threatening, therefore I should have stuck it out. She doesn't know about Julian and the broken engagement. I am very aware of the irony. I didn't value my career until I nearly lost it. I was convinced governessing was only temporary. I was engaged. Once Julian got promoted at the Foreign Office, we would be married and my working days would be over. Only it didn't happen like that. And I earned Miss Wall's displeasure just at the point where my career became, after my family, my whole world. I've worked hard to win back her trust. I took the worst position the agency had to offer with the Earl and Countess of Glenshee. Don't be fooled by the title. The Countess is Victorian in her attitudes to staff, Glenshee Castle is colder than the Arctic, and the Glenshee girls are interested only in dogs and ponies. It wasn't enough to rehabilitate me in Miss Wall's eyes. Could this new role demonstrate to Miss Wall that I'm serious about my career? But if I blow it this time, I'll be out of chances, and the Paget agency will let me go. Chapter 3.
Dinah Doyle's tragically early death means we only have a handful of musicals to remember her by. The fact that those musicals stand up to the best is due to the magic that happened when Dinah and Aiden were on screen together. Hollywood's Secrets by Emmy Calvez.
It's my last night at home, and my spirits are low. To be entirely honest, I've been downcast since the dance on Saturday. It was marginally less ghastly than I feared. The camaraderie of the other ladies in the kitchen helped a little. There was laughter as we made sandwiches and buttered scones. But it was hard to watch as men the same age as me led girls barely older than Rose onto the dance floor. I came home in an impotent rage about society valuing men for their economic worth and women solely for their looks. The last 3 days have passed in a flurry of washing, ironing and packing. My trunk waits by the front door. The essentials I'll need on the ship and train will go in my travelling case. Before I set off for a new position, there's usually a spark of excitement about exploring new places and meeting new people. This evening, that's very much lacking. I don't want to go. It's not only the fear of revisiting New York. I'm anxious about pretty much everything about this job. My worries stretch from the minor, how will I cope with the Californian sunshine, to the professional, how do I educate a child who has recently lost her mother, to the downright fanciful. Do film stars really live a life of cocktails and parties by the pool, as Rosie's magazines suggest? As my departure creeps closer, my brain focuses on Mr. Neil. What will he be like as an employer? I've not worked for a widower before. My positions have all been with the happily or, as the Governess sees a lot, unhappily married. He's likely to be much more involved than the fathers I've worked for previously, who've considered the education of their children their wives' domain. And what is he like as a person? Living in the same house as him, will I see behind the movie star gloss? I'm folding undergarments when Rosie opens my bedroom door, bringing an unwelcome draught with her. Come on, Hester, the cocoa is getting cold. Bother, what time is it? I check my watch. 9:10. My sisters have requested that we all have cocoa together this evening in Father's room. I'm touched by the request, but concerned my brave face will slip. I don't want to leave them with tears. Righty-ho, I'm coming. In Father's room, Meg sits on the hearthrug with Jeffer's head resting on her knee. There's a steady blaze in the grate which throws out much-needed warmth. Here she is. Father gestures for me to take the seat opposite him, as Rosie perches on his footstool. How is the traveller feeling about her journey? Meg hands me a cup of cocoa, that I'm not sure I've packed enough reading material, I say as I take a sip. The journey will take 8 days, 5 nights on board ship, 3 more on the train across America. I've got something to help with that. Father reaches behind him and produces a black-bound volume. On the spine is written, American Notes by Charles Dickens. Thank you, I say, as I open the front cover, releasing the unmistakable scent of old book. It'll be good to have Dickens as my guide. America would have changed enormously in the 90 years since he visited, Father says, but I thought you might find it entertaining. I will, thank you. One of the tasks I've set myself for the journey is to swat up on American history, and this will provide a different perspective to the textbooks. Me next, Rosie says, jumping up and crossing the room to Father's desk. She takes a parcel wrapped in brown paper from a pile of books. What is this? I exclaim. They don't normally go to this trouble before I leave. We wanted to do something special, Meg says. We know you're only going to California to keep the roof over our heads, and I wanted to make sure you're not totally clueless when you get there. Rosie hands me the parcel and sits down. All the girls at school are jealous that you're going to live with a movie star. Well, we'll be living in the same house, but I expect I'll hardly see him. I pull the string undone. I'll be spending all my time with his... I break off as the paper falls away to reveal a scrapbook. Collaged on the front are photographs Rosie has cut out of magazines. Across the front of them she's stencilled, Hester's Guide to Hollywood. Oh! I flip through the pages. There are photographs of Mr. Neil and Miss Doyle, reviews of their films, articles about Hollywood and other movie stars, all annotated with comments and instructions. Tears prickle behind my eyes. This is so thoughtful. Where on earth did you get all of this? The girls at school helped. We pulled all of our magazines and I cut out everything I thought might be useful. She takes it from me, flips to the end and holds it up. This is the advertisement for the face powder I was telling you about, just in case you get invited to any Hollywood parties. Governesses do not go to parties, I say, but the words come out a little choked. I reach over and hug her tightly. Thank you. It's awfully kind of you. As I sit back, I give up the pretense and get out my handkerchief. Clearly my brave face has not fooled them. As a family, we're not prone to displays of emotion, relying on jokes and banter to express our feelings, but this evening, I need to find the words to express the sadness lodged in my chest. I'm going to miss you all so much. We'll miss you too. Meg produces another parcel from behind her back. We always do, but especially this time. The especially nearly undoes me. I'm going to be further from home than ever before. There will be over 5,000 miles between us. Letters don't travel much faster than people over that distance. I unwrap the brown paper to reveal a cream blouse with a round collar. Oh my, it's beautiful. Whenever did you find time to make this? Well, there's been some early mornings, Meg smiles. It's linen. Even with long sleeves, it should keep you cool. Oh, I don't know what to say. I mop a few more tears before giving Meg a hug. This is so kind of you. I look at each of them, imprinting their features on my heart. I don't know how long it will be before I'm home again. I have no idea what their futures will hold in the months or years I'll be away. Meg may be engaged or married by the time I return. Rosie could have finished school. And who knows how Father's health will be. The thought prompts me to get up and hug him too. It's something we so rarely do that he looks a little startled. He pats my arm and says, "There now," as if I'm a little girl again. As I return to my feet, Jaffa stirs himself and puts his head on my lap. I've not forgotten you, I say, as I ruffle his ears. I'm going to miss you too. I catch the early train from Hawes to Northallerton. Meg and Jaffa give me a lift to the station as the sun creeps over the side of the valley. The train is already in, steam billowing from the engine. Meg gives me a fierce hug, and there are tears on both our cheeks as I climb into the carriage. Doors slam up, and then, with a jerk, the train is moving. I yank on the leather strap to open the window and lean out to wave. My last sight of Meg is of her crouched down with her arms around Jaffa. Fortunately, the compartment is empty, so no one sees me cry. The express takes me to London. Then it's across the capital in a taxi to pick up my tickets and other papers from the agency's offices on Kensington Square. Miss Wall summons me into her office for a brief interview where she tells me that even though manners may be more relaxed in Hollywood, she relies upon me to conduct myself with the appropriate decorum and maintain the agency's high standards. The subtext of the interview is very clearly, "Don't let me down." Another taxi takes me past St. James's Park, and suddenly I'm assailed by memories. Does Julian still work in the Foreign Office on the opposite side of the park? Or has he achieved his long-hoped-for overseas posting and is now in Cairo or Bombay? I'll never know. He's gone from my life, married to someone else. Yet the memories still fill my heart, of feeding the ducks in St. James's Park, strolling along the Strand on a chilly December afternoon after we'd seen Richard of Bordeaux at the New Theatre, sharing a bag of chestnuts on Victoria Embankment on Christmas Eve. At Fenchurch Street Station, I take the stopper to Tilbury. It's twilight, and as the train puffs past suburban houses, I catch glimpses of the lives inside it lit up like a stage set. Would we have lived in a house like these? Would we have built a life together in one of these commuter towns, with Julian taking the train into the city every morning? By now, would we have had a child, or maybe even two? The middle-aged lady sat opposite me coughs, and that pulls me back into the present. A maelstrom of emotions are lodged in my chest, but I've been brought up not to display emotion in public. I force myself to take up my book, to calmly open it, and read the words on the page. Looking back does no good, especially when I'll never have an answer to the question that bothers me most of all. But I can't stop myself from running my fingers over and over the scar on my cheek. Britannic leaves Tilbury at 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning. I'm in my cabin unpacking when the ship judders into life. There's a thrum from the diesel engines which vibrates through the body of the vessel as if a great monster is coming to life. I put the photograph of my family on the bedside cabinet. It was taken 2 summers ago on a brief visit home from Glenshie Castle. Father leans on one of the pillars by Otterdean's front door with Meg and Rosie next to him. Jaffa stands in front of them. His tail is slightly blurry as it's been captured mid-wag. I imagine what each of them would say to me. Father would tell me I'm braver than this. Meg would ask if I've got my best hat on to give me courage, and Rosie would want me to find out if there's any famous people on the ship. If there are, they're unlikely to be in second class, so our paths will rarely cross. I look around the small single cabin which will be my home for the next 5 days. There'll be enough time alone in here once we're at sea. I put on my coat and best hat and head out on deck. The wind is cold. Winter has not yet released its grip. Holding onto my hat, I approach the rail. The ropes have been cast off. I walk towards the bow of the ship. The tugboats are ready to ease the liner up the river. I yawn and raise a gloved hand to cover my mouth. After the long day of travelling yesterday and rising at dawn this morning to embark, I am very weary indeed. The banks of the Thames are slipping away. Now we're in motion. I can no longer push away the thoughts of what lies at the end of this crossing. New York. My right hand moves to cover the scar on my arm. It's become a nervous tick, a barometer of my emotional state, which at this moment is sinking faster than mercury when a storm is coming. There are 5 days at sea ahead of me. 5 days for my thoughts and fears to haunt me. I cover my face with my gloved hands. There's no excitement on this trip to chase away the sadness of leaving. I already feel homesick. Tears clog my throat. There are a few other hardy souls walking the deck or stood by the rail. I keep my head down and don't look at them. As soon as I've shut the door of my cabin, I'm crying. I tug my gloves off, sink into the chair, and let the tears fall. Time passes slowly on board ship. I keep busy as it's the only way to avoid worrying. I read. I have a weakness for detective novels, and travelling is the perfect opportunity for a bit of armchair detection. I force myself, despite the biting cold of the North Atlantic, to walk the deck for at least half an hour each day. I write a letter home, which I won't be able to send until we reach dry land. I'm befriended by Betty from Columbus, Ohio, a bespectacled widow who has strong opinions on everything from President Roosevelt to the likely winner of this year's Kentucky Derby. As the Paget rules, the regulations by which all Paget governesses must abide, prohibit me from revealing who my employer will be, I can only tell her that I'm travelling to California for work. She takes one look at my clothes and decides I'm a teacher. When I settle in my cabin after dinner each evening, I look at Rosie's scrapbook. I learn about Mr. Neil and Miss Doyle's films, The Paradise Club, Harlequin Nights, Broadway Dreams. Even the names are evocative, conjuring up a very different world from the grey years we've lived through during the slump. There's a photograph of them outside Crown Pictures, the movie studio where they both worked, and another of them kneeling with their hands in cement at a place called the Forecourt of the Stars. I spend a lot of time looking at a snap of Mr. Neil at a film premiere, wearing a dinner jacket which makes him look particularly debonair. He stood next to a rotund, middle-aged man called Harry King, who is the boss of Crown Pictures. Rose has also included articles on places in Hollywood. There's the Brown Derby restaurant and Grauman's Egyptian Theatre, which looks like it has been transported from the Valley of the Kings. Rose has written on the edge of the paper that I must go to both of them and added in capitals, "Look out for stars." I wish I had her enthusiasm for this trip. She would be abuzz with excitement. I am sleeping and eating less each day, filling the wakeful wee small hours by reading words I barely remember in the morning. We are scheduled to arrive on Tuesday morning. I go to sleep late, reading past midnight to distract myself from the ordeal ahead. My dreams are punctuated by the screech of brakes, the crash of breaking glass, the grinding of metal against metal. I wake, as I always do, as the screaming starts. I switch the bedside light on, fumbling with the switch because my hand is shaking. Each breath feels like an effort. I sit up and press my other hand against my chest. My heartbeat is fast and erratic. I've found only one medicine helps when I feel like this. I have to move. I pull on the first clothes that come to hand, grab my coat and hat, and go up on deck. The sun is inching above the stern of the ship, but the light remains thin and grey. There's land to left and right. Journey's end is close. It's bitterly cold, and there's a stiff wind. I lean into it, forcing my body to battle against it. My fingers and toes prickle and then grow numb, but I don't stop until the thump of my heart is from exertion, not panic. Then, with the skyscrapers of Manhattan visible from the bow, I return to my cabin to finish packing. Nausea threatens as I walk down the gangplank. I've spent the past couple of hours reminding myself that lightning doesn't strike twice, and similar homilies. They've had little effect. I step into the White Star Line arrival building. Movement surrounds me, passengers, porters, sailors. Voices are raised in excitement and welcome. Everything feels strangely far away. I'm an island, alone in my silence and terror. I trudge forwards, gripping my case. There's a queue for passport control. My hand is sweaty around the stiff blue cover. I reach the booth. My passport is stamped, my visa inspected. I join another queue to collect my trunk. My voice falters as I ask the porter to find me a taxi. Then, because there's no other choice, I follow him out of the door. The smell immediately takes me back. The salt tang from the Hudson River, petrol fumes and smoke. My heart is pounding like an express train. I grip my handbag with shaking hands. My chest tightens. This is not the same, I tell myself. I'm older and, hopefully, a little wiser. I'm not engaged. I reach the front of the queue. The driver climbs out. He's short with dark hair and sports a brown trilby pushed far back on his head. My trunk and case are loaded into the boot. I remember to tip the porter before I climb into the back seat. "Where to, lady?" the driver asks. "Pennsylvania Station." "Sure thing." He nods and puts the car into gear. I wrap the strap of my handbag around my hands. The leather bites into my skin. I focus on that sensation and try to push all of the others away. I can do this. I have to do this. The car joins the carriageway. The road is wide and busy. There's a row of warehouses, a building site with a huge crane swinging beams into position, tenement blocks with washing fluttering from balconies. A grocer displays a faded striped awning. Next to it is a picture house. The matinee is the Paradise Club, Mr. Neil and Miss Doyle's third musical. "You going far?" the driver adds. "Los Angeles." My voice is slightly strangled. I tug at my collar, need more air. It feels as if my girdle is tightening around my stomach, squeezing the breath out of my body. I fight against it, trying to make each breath deep as I was taught in calisthenics at school. He looks at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay, lady? You sure look pale." "I'm fine," I say automatically. It's very far from the truth. Darts of remembrance hit me. Glass, blood, screaming, pain. The taxi slows at a junction. Crossing the intersection is a green bus with mustard yellow trim, just like the one... I grip the edge of the car seat with one hand, hold onto my handbag with the other, but I can't stop the shaking which grips my body. I close my eyes, but I can't shut out the sounds of cars and buses, lorries and trams. I try to breathe, but my breath is choked as moments from the crash flash into my mind.
"Jeez, lady,"
the driver says. His voice sounds far away.
"you want me to stop? You look like you're gonna puke."
No, don't stop. That's the last thing I want. How much longer until we get there?
5 minutes. Can you hold on that long?
I nod. My head swims with the movement. Then, feeling like he deserves some kind of explanation, I add, I was in an accident the last time I was in New York. This brings it back. He glances at me over his shoulder.
"Is that where you got the scar?"
I'm startled that he's asked. Few people do. My gloved fingers brush my cheek as I reply, yes. His gaze meets mine in the rearview mirror.
"Hold on. I'll get you the pen. Just don't puke in my cab. It's hell to get out of the upholstery."
I nod weakly. Thank you. He keeps talking. It's stop and start due to the pressure of traffic, but his voice becomes a hook pulling me out of the panic. He tells me about his wife, Dolores, his children, a boy and 2 girls, and his hope to make it out west one day. The taxi pulls up outside a building with an imposing colonnade of Doric columns.
"This is it," he says. "Hold on. I'll get a porter."
I watch out of the window as he speaks to the uniformed porter. He points to me, his gestures saying as much as words. A moment later, the door opens and the driver offers me his hand.
"You'll be all right now, lady. This is Don. He's going to find you your train."
Don must be 6'4". He lifts my trunk as if it is filled with cotton wool. Thank you. I take money from my purse and offer it to the driver. You've been very kind.
"Keep it, lady."
He tips his cap to me.
"This is on me."
His generosity surprises so much that I can only manage to stammer, Are you sure?" before he's walking away. He raises a hand before he gets back in his cab. I watch the taxi pull away, rejoin the stream of traffic. He's a Samaritan in a trilby, and I don't even know his name. I look up at the imposing facade of the station. From here, I'll get the train to Chicago, and then I'll change to the Union Pacific sleeper, which will take me through to Los Angeles. My feet feel dislocated from my body as I follow the porter through the elaborate entrance. There's an arcade of expensive-looking shops that opens into an enormous stone-lined atrium, which is as lofty as a cathedral. Despite the bustle of passengers, the height of the space creates a feeling of calm. I take a breath and loosen my grip on my handbag. I still feel weak and light-headed, which, as I skipped breakfast, is probably not helped by lack of food. I check the clock on the wall. My train leaves in 40 minutes.
"You can wait in here,"
the porter says, opening a door marking women's waiting room. An oppressive heat washes out to me. I look up at the porter, a somewhat difficult task considering his height. Thank you, but what I really need is refreshment. Is there somewhere I can get a cup of tea?
Chapter 4. Los Angeles, the metropolis of Southern California and of a vast adjoining area, is frequently regarded as one of the newer American cities, as an outgrowth of the motion picture industry, and as a creation of the real estate promoter. Los Angeles in the 1930s, the WPA Guide to the City of Angels. Marie Calves opens the double doors into the Los Angeles Central Public Library. Silence settles on her shoulders like a shroud. She pushes her dark, curly hair away from her face and takes a deep breath. 8 hours before she can go home. She can get through them. She has to. As her sister, Therese, reminds her daily, she was lucky to get this job after being fired by Crown Pictures. Almost a year later, she still misses the script room, the clatter of her typewriter.